Hi guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post a new true crime video every single week. Definitely hit that like button, hit that notification bell button, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another video of mine. Today's case was requested by True Crime and Unwind, and thank you so much for requesting this case because this case has been on my mind for years and I have been wanting to cover this case, but I knew I'd have to really make some time to research it. This case took place back in 2014, and back then even, I was researching this case. I was into it. Not into it, but you know what I mean? I was into the details. I was like, what led to this happening? The most notorious part of this case is the fact that the killer left behind like 140 page document called the Manifesto of Elliot Rodgers. And back then, I read the entire thing. And for this video, I read the entire thing once again. Basically, this manifesto goes through the reasonings behind and the stories behind why Elliot did what he did. Honestly, if he wasn't such a creep, I feel like he would have had a career or something in writing, because his manifesto, I think, is written quite well and you want to read more, you want to find out more about it. I highly recommend you guys, if you are interested in this case, to go ahead and read some parts of his manifesto, because it kind of really shows you exactly what we all want to know. The other side of a very sad and twisted mentality of a narcissist, and it definitely does exhibit some signs of mental illness showing through. I think I was really fascinated with Elliot because I had someone like this in my life at one point. Obviously not to the extent of what Elliot Rodgers was, but it also kind of helped me understand this person that I knew a little bit more. I think it's super important to be aware of the people around you, their behaviors, and how you treat people. You'll see why. Now, before we get into it, I want to give a warning that this case does deal with a mass shooting. So I want to put that out there right now. So it is a sensitive topic, and yeah, let's get into it. Now, Elliot's manifesto, which essentially kind of just tells you most things you need to know about this case, and it's written in parts. So it's written like 0 to 5 years, 7 to 8, and then the year 13. So more like chapters in his life. And I think these years are what he considers as significant events and happenings in his life. And for this video, I kind of want to give you as much detail as I can, but also stick to the main facts of this case. Also, there are many victims in this case, and my heart goes out to the families of these victims and to the victims themselves. But I also don't want to delve too deep into them because it happened so long ago. I don't want to bring up any old wounds. Also, I could sit here and talk about this case for hours, but I don't know how long I have to film before my daughter wakes up and is a little hungry monster. So let's begin by talking about Elliot's early life. Okay, so Elliot Rodgers, he was born on July 24th, 1991, and his parents were Peter Rodgers and Lee Chen. Now, Elliot starts off in his manifesto as being Elliot, and he starts off by saying, "The day that I was born, my parents must have been so happy that day. It was the happiest day of their lives because I was born. They had witnessed the birth of their first child and they named me Elliot Oliver Robertson Rodgers." Now, Peter, his father, he was actually a British filmmaker, and he is known for his work on the movie The Hunger Games. And Lee was his research assistant, and they met on the job, ended up falling in love. Elliot also had a sister named Georgia, and then his grandfather was also like a renowned photojournalist. Elliot goes on to say that his family, or his grandfather, was actually from a very wealthy family, but they lost all their money during the Great Depression. And he states that his grandfather, the photojournalist, George Rodger, even though he took, amazing photos, famous photos during the Second World War, they were never able to regain their family wealth and fortune. Elliot's mother, Lee, is of Chinese descent, and she was born in Malaysia, and she moved to England to pursue her career. She actually moved to England as a nurse working on film sets, and through this, she ended up making great friends with a lot of famous people in the film industry. She was known to be friends with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. She also apparently dated George Lucas for a short period of time, and that's what Elliot writes in his manifesto. And as you can just tell from this little information that I've given, Elliot is very focused on wealth, fortune, and status. It's important to him. Now, Elliot states the first 5 years of his life were beautiful. They lived in London in this beautiful, large red brick house in Sussex, and he states that at that house, during that period, he only has beautiful and happy memories of his life. Shortly after he turned 5, his sister Georgia was born, and it was around this time that they left England and moved on over to LA. They lived in Woodland Hills, which they then moved on over to Topanga, and they had a beautiful large home with a swimming pool, which Elliot referred to as the Roundhouse. Then the beginning of when Elliot's life would, I guess, change is when he was around 7, his mother approached him and informed him that Peter and her were going to be getting a divorce. Now, Elliot was really affected by this, as most kids, would be, that nobody wants their parents to get divorced usually. But for Elliot, being a kid who valued status and the financial security that 2 parents brought him, I believe this was an even bigger challenge for him. He would be living with his mother and his sister in his mom's new house, which he referred to as the Red House, and his father would just continue living in the Round House, the big one with the swimming pool. He did, however, state that although this new Red House was much smaller than the Round House, and he had to share a room with his sister Georgia, he didn't mind this because he was practically living essentially the same life, just in 2 different homes. And his mother was such a kind and loving person that she really made his life and this change for him a good one. Then just a few months later, a couple months, as Elliot puts it, a new person would enter his life, a woman by the name of Sumaya, and this would be his dad's new girlfriend. And according to him, she was beautiful. And honestly, as I'm reading this, I realized this right here, his dad getting a new girlfriend, was the start to an obsessive thought that would later be detrimental to him and so many others. The fact that his dad got a girlfriend so quickly was shocking to him. He couldn't understand it, like how his dad got a girlfriend so fast. And it made him believe, at a really young age, mind you, that women, found his father attractive, hence he was able to get a new girlfriend so quickly. He actually writes a quote that I think is important. I'm going to read it to you. He states, "I subconsciously held my father in a higher regard because of this. It is very interesting how this phenomenon works, that males who can easily find female mates garner more respect from their fellow men, even children." And because Elliot's mom, Lee, was friends with George Lucas, she would actually get a lot of invites to red carpet events, which Elliot would also attend. Also, he calls his parents mother and father in the manifesto. I don't know if he actually calls them that in real life, but to me, it's super weird. It doesn't seem natural. It seems like he's kind of saying it to sound like how other rich kids talk. Does that make sense? Like, I don't feel like he actually called them that, but that's how he refers to them in the manifesto. Now, by the time he turned 9, he started to have more intrusive thoughts, and they're not abnormal thoughts, but it's more so the fact that to him, they were obsessive thoughts. He began to now take note of other kids around him, especially other males, and he noticed that the boys in his class were taller than him, and even some of the girls were taller than him. So he heard that playing basketball makes you taller. So he would go out at the age of 9, he would go out onto the basketball court, play basketball. He would lay on the ground and stretch in hopes that it was going to make him taller. And again, that's not a weird thing to do. A lot of kids try different things. I mean, I've heard of like people pinching their nose with pegs, trying to shrink their nose or things like that. So again, I don't think this is weird, but it's the obsessiveness about it. Most kids just try it like once or twice and like, whatever, move on. But he would work at it, but not really work at it. You'll know what I'm saying later. Then, along with playing basketball, he noticed that some of the boys were better than him at the sport. So then he's like, well, shit, not only are they taller than me, now they're also better than me at the sport. So I'm physically weaker and shorter than these guys. Then he realized that even boys younger than him were stronger than him. And he's like, so triggered by this, so triggered. And it's so clear that he is a very jealous person and gets upset very easily. Around that time, he began living with his parents 1 week on, 1 week off. So 1 week with one parent, 1 week with the other parent, which I think is quite tiring, but he seemed to like it. And the main reason for him liking this was because he got to spend the weekends now at his mom's house, because before he would spend the weekends at his father's house. So he enjoyed spending the weekends with his mom. And remember the dad's girlfriend, Sumaya, their relationship progressed very quickly, and Sumaya moved in very quickly into Peter's house, the round house, the really big house with the swimming pool. So when Elliot was staying at his father's house, he would also be staying with Sumaya, and he did not like Sumaya's rules that she placed on him. He said that his father was always out working, so he ends up spending a lot of his time at his father's house when it was his father's turn with Sumaya instead. He said, she's not my real mom, so who is she to impose rules on me? And again, correct me if you guys think I'm wrong. I feel like that's kind of normal when your parents separate. You want to kind of rebel and do that kind of stuff. So I don't think this is abnormal. But what kids fail to understand is that if Sumaya is there in the home while Peter is out, she's in the home. She's living in that home. That's her home now. She's taking care of the house. Of course, she has to impose some rules because it's her home too. Also, he had a really wide rotation of nannies, which he seemed to love his nannies. He didn't have a problem with them, and he just preferred to stay at his mom's house more. Then around the 4th grade is when he states that he had some sort of awakening, and that's when he started to really understand how the world worked, that the world was based on hierarchies and some people were better than others. Now, again, this I believe was a foundational shift and became super important to him. He started to notice at school there are now the cool kids, which he wanted to be a part of. The cool kids were super popular. They dressed well. They were well liked. And they were always having a really good time. So then he begins to compare himself to these cool kids, and to his shock horror realizes, oh my God, I'm not one of the cool kids at all. I'm actually one of the dorky kids. On top of him, being shy and unpopular and not dressing well, not having a cool hairstyle, he was also of mixed race. Now, him being mixed race, being white and Chinese, was very different to the cool white popular kids. And this really began to affect his self-esteem. So with his parents' permission, he decided to bleach his entire hair blonde. And, this kind of worked a little bit because he wanted to be cool, and it gave him some attention at school. However, it only lasted a few days because kids, they get over things. And even though this attention was very short-lived, he loved it. He loved the attention he got from it. So then from this point, from what I gather, is that he just tried out every single cool or popular thing that was going on at the time to make him fit in with the popular kids, in hopes of fitting in with the popular kids. Pokemon, he loved it since he was little, but it was no longer cool now, so he gave it up, decided to stop playing it, and he gave his cards away. Skateboarding at the time was now trendy, so he decided, okay, I'm going to take up skateboarding. He asks his dad, okay, buy me a skateboard. His dad was happy because he was like, oh my God, you're actually doing something sporty, go ahead and do it. He literally turned this into an obsession. Whatever was cool at the time, he wanted to be a part of it. Then he moved on to a bigger and better home. I'm guessing his father became a little bit more successful at that time. This home was now in Woodland Hill Heights, and it was an area that bordered the prestigious Calabasas, where all the celebrities live. Now, in this home, his father was moving in with Sumaya again, and he threw the biggest temper tantrum to get the best bedroom, not the master, but the next best bedroom. It was a bedroom with a balcony and its own bathroom, and he wanted the best. He deserved the best. His father actually wanted this bedroom to go to Georgia because she was younger than him, 5 years younger. And, thinking that the youngest child should be closest to the master bedroom because that was the closest bedroom to each other. But he was like, no, 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 I need that bedroom. It's for me. And you could call this maybe sibling jealousy. You could just say, well, Georgia gets everything, so maybe that's why he wanted it. But it doesn't seem that way. He doesn't even once mention anything about his sister. It's him and what he wants. What's the problem though? He does nothing for it. He doesn't work for anything. And I know he's a kid, but that doesn't mean you can't show some sort of effort or help or just be kind to your family. It's all about Elliot. And I feel he truly, like, deep down believes that he is entitled to everything he wants. Now, over the next short while, as I kept reading, Elliot just seemed to have a great life. Everything was going well. He would attend Hollywood parties. He would get every present he ever wanted. He just lived the life of a very wealthy child. Elliot didn't do well with making friends because naturally he was quite shy, but it was him wanting to be so cool that would actually hinder him. When I was researching this, a lot of articles and places would say that Elliot's childhood was quite normal. And I don't know if I agree with that. He lived in amazing houses. He went to movie premieres and other events. His parents knew celebrities. He had like 4 nannies at one point. He went to fancy restaurants. He traveled abroad. He did play like a normal kid throughout his childhood, but the way he turned out, the way he himself remembers his childhood, I feel like if you were there with Elliot as he was growing up, there had to be some red flags that went unnoticed. Sometimes the super shy behavior, lack of social skills, that's not normal. It's not just your child being shy. And I'm saying this through, my own experience with people. It's not normal all the time. And especially when you're really young, like, you don't really overthink things the way he did, unless there's an issue. And Elliot definitely had issues. Then Elliot started middle school, and that's a little bit different, right? Like, middle school, everyone's a little bit more grown up. Everyone's trying to be cool. And that was also another big change for him. During this time, Elliot deeply, deeply stressed about just fitting in. And I think this is normal. Everyone gets stressed out and scared about starting a new school, making new friends. But again, with Elliot, everything is just intensified with him. Everything is just on another level of stressful. He took everything super personally. And then also his friendships outside of school, his friendship with James, the close friend, kind of just faded away, but he continued his friendships with some other kids. And I mean, he would have sleepovers on Friday nights, most Friday nights. So again, that seems like a normal childhood thing that kids do. And for a period of time, in terms of friendships and Elliot, it seemed normal. Then when he turned 12, Sumaya would fall pregnant with a child, and that would be Elliot's baby brother. And Elliot seemed happy about having a baby brother. Then when he was 13, he was at an internet cafe, Planet Cyber. And while he was there, he used to go there to play computer games. And while he was there, he saw an older boy on the computer watching porn. And this was the first time he had ever seen anything like that. He had no idea what was going on. He saw in detail what happened when 2 people were having sex, and he didn't even know what it was. And he began experiencing sexual feelings, as most teenagers do, but Elliot didn't know what to do with those feelings at the time. And this really traumatized him, but at the same time, it aroused him. So he was just like, what the hell is going on? Now, if you know anything about Elliot Rodgers, you know that sex, the very word, filled him with hate. Once Elliot became a teenager, he would want it, crave it, fantasize about it, but he would never get it. Then boys at school began talking about sex, obviously, because they were also discovering what it was, and this would be what would consume Elliot's mind for the next several years. At this time, Elliot would begin to retreat into computer games. And again, this is super normal, especially for teenage boys. And it was at this point he began to become very consumed with the computer game World of Warcraft, or WoW, if you've ever played it. Now, most of his computers at home were not equipped to play this game, so he would often go to Planet Cyber to play it, and he would invite his friends along to play with him due to, as he described it, life problems and no particular reason at all. his bunch of friends were starting to drop off. He had 4 friends apart from James: Charlie, Stephen, Elijah, and John. He claims that they just stopped playing with him. I don't believe they went to school with him, so I believe that it was either Elliot's mom or their moms that would often make plans so that the boys could hang out together, but maybe Elliot made no effort. He never claims that he tried. It was his mom or Sumaya, arranging these play dates for this teenage boy, and I don't believe Elliot ever made any real efforts. And you know how boys are. Boys are kind of very lax about these things, so maybe no one kind of made an effort, and these friendships just fizzled out. Then his mom decides to move houses once again, and this time she moves into an apartment. An apartment, he says, because he thinks of apartments as being low class and poor. Now, in reality, his mom had to do this because his father began paying less child support, so she couldn't afford the previous house. This was also, as he says, another reason why his friendships also dwindled away, because there was no way in hell anyone could see him living in an apartment. So he would refuse actually to let anyone come over or stay over. He was way too embarrassed, and he claims that a lot of his friends forgot about him, but I feel like it was just a lack of effort. So at this point, in terms of friendships, he was only really friends with his childhood close friend, James. And even though they kind of like faded away at one point, they kind of rekindled. They would just have this kind of like on again, off again friendship. And not that anything was wrong with it, but I think it's just how the friendship was. At this point, his social life had just reverted to being online only, playing games, playing with friends online. And apart from James, that was his only form of social connection. And this is when Elliot claims that he began to feel extremely lonely. He was so isolated in his online world of WoW. And I have qualms about this, but Jay disagrees with me in terms of games because he used to be a gamer. He doesn't believe that gaming online or just gaming in general is bad. And I just don't know how I feel about that. The problem I find is that these games are so addicting and nobody really sets limitations on these games. And even if the parents do, the kids lose their minds and lie or find other ways to play the game because they're so addicted to it. It really removes them from the realities and experiences of children in the real world and isolates them to this online fantasy world. And obviously I'm talking about extreme cases. And this is exactly what happened with Elliot. He began to only care about the game, and at his mom's house he was able to just play unlimited, freely, no boundaries. And he claims this made him extremely bored at school because nothing compares to an online fantasy world, right? Like, how can real life compete with that? Through his own admission, Elliot claims that he became the weird kid at school. He started to act weird and annoying just to get some attention, and he would intentionally do this. And as kids do, people started making fun of him at school. He even names one of the popular girls in his manifesto, a girl from his 7th grade class, and he claims that it is because of her. She's the reason why he began to hate all girls so much. He saw them as mean, cruel, heartless creatures that took pleasure in his suffering. Now, this girl he named, she was actually the first girl that he had a crush on, and one day she made fun of him and teased him. And to be teased by someone you like, at that age, it wounded him deeply. He just started to believe that the world was not a safe place, and he was only safe in his online world of games. Soon, Sumaya gave birth to a baby boy named Jazz, and Elliot now had a baby brother. And he states that he was excited about this. He was happy to have a little brother. Then soon after, he realized, oh my God, I'm going to be going to high school. And this filled Elliot with dread. His parents sent him to Crespi Carmelite High School, which is a Catholic all-boys school. Again, he failed to make new friends at this school, and this was the first time he experienced true bullying. Some older kids threw food at him, and he was too scared to do anything back, but he was so embarrassed and just so upset by this. Now, again, I understand bullying is tough. It's really hard to deal with, and I dealt with bullying moving, to Australia. Well, when I moved to Australia, and I can understand, like, I'm a pretty strong person, I would say, but that experience was really difficult. And then I think for a person like Elliot, it makes it that much harder. Someone who takes everything personally, like, I can understand how it would be difficult for him. And it's just like, if he told his parents, I mean, what can you really do? I think you got to equip kids to deal with, I mean, first of all, let's teach kids not to bully people, but that's life, right? So you got to teach your kids to not take it, but there are steps on how to deal with bullying, right? And I feel like maybe Elliot, I don't know, it's such a hard situation, right? Now, at this age, he's 14 years old. So keep in mind, what do 14-year-old teenage boys talk about? Games, sports, or sex, right? So that's exactly what happened with Elliot. Everywhere he went, he claims people were just talking about hot girls and sex. Then around this age, he had his first masturbation experience, and this propelled him into having a super high sex drive. And at this time, he felt depressed, as he claims, because he wanted sex so bad and other men were getting it, but not him. Other guys in his class would claim that they were now having sex with their girlfriends, and Elliot stated that this would leave him fuming mad. He couldn't get girls, as he claimed, and he continued to get bullied throughout the 8th and ninth grade, and then soon his parents would send him to a new school, a public school. Now, this was hard for him because it was twice the size of his previous school, and it had girls in it, teenage girls. And according to him, he really suffered there because the girls there were mean to him and bullied him. And then the girls would like the mean guys. And it was just this vicious cycle that just exposed him to how brutal and cruel the world really was, according to him. Then when he was 15, he breaks down to his mom. He tells her, I can't do it anymore. I'm really suffering at this school. So his parents then decide to send him off to a continuation school. He actually went to 2 continuation schools, and they kind of just worked more like homeschooling, where basically he would attend the school for 3 hours per day, and then he would come home and finish the rest of his work at home and work from home. Also, to quickly reflect on his relationship with Sumaya, they still were not getting along. Remember that big room with a balcony and a bathroom? He now lost that room when his brother was born because his brother, Jazz, needed the room that was closest to the master bedroom. Then he lost his second room that he was relocated to because his brother's nanny required that room to sleep in. Sumaya would impose rules on him, and if he didn't, agree to those rules or disobeyed them, she would take away his computer, which infuriated him. And he stated that father didn't even lift a finger to stop her. Like his father should have been the one to put her in her place. Look, and to me, it seems like Sumaya was doing what needed to be done to Elliot from a very young age. Impose rules and responsibilities into Elliot so that he knew that what Elliot wanted was not the most important thing in the world, in that family. His needs were not the most important, but in saying that, I also do feel that Elliot needed far more attention than what he got. And you normally think that giving more attention to a kid is a bad thing, but I don't mean it in that way. I mean that he needed more attention and a peek into what was happening with Elliot. He needed structure and someone to talk to him. Now, I said before his father started paying less child support a couple of years earlier, but this ended up turning into his father suffering a deep financial setback. And this happened because he invested in a bad movie. In response to this, in his manifesto, Elliot states, "Could things get any worse for me? Because it's all about Elliot." And then because of this, his father had to cut child support off completely from his mom. So then his mom had to move again. This time she moved into a condo in a much lower class area. Highly embarrassing for Elliot. So during this period, Elliot's life, in a nutshell, was attending school for 3 hours a day and then coming home and playing WoW for the rest of his time, immersing himself in online culture, having these deep sexual urges and then having to relieve these urges by himself, which he found was an atrocity given that other men had women to relieve these urges for them. His hatred for people who had sex began to spread inside him legit like a plague. He would stay stuck inside of his room for most of the time, but whenever he did go outside, if he saw other couples in front of him, like even if they were making out or something like that, it would torture him. He hated it. And obviously being online so much, he had plenty of access to sexual content and other people's experiences. It's all over the internet. Because of this, he slowly began to spend less time online and more time in public in the outside world, just studying it, observing it, watching couples, watching other people. And the more he watched it, the more he claimed the world to be a horrible and unfair place. He literally just got angry by just watching people live their lives outside. And the more he watched them, the angrier he got. His anger made him stronger inside. And this is when he decided that sex should be outlawed. It was the only way to make the world a fair place, because if he couldn't have it, then he would destroy it. Now, this is when his views became pretty dangerous, because he was 17 and believed that he could rise to power and set the world straight. He spent a lot of his time reading books about sociology and politics and history, and spent a lot of his time doing this, trying to learn as much as he could. He became a new person, furiously driven by one goal. He wanted to have sex so bad, but felt like he could never get it, that he would never have it, and he wanted to destroy it for everyone else. After he graduated high school, he started college at Pierce College, and then he went to Moore Park College, and these were both community colleges in Woodland Hills. At this time, he was living with his mother. He had no real plans for the future, no real goals, and he was just kind of like floating about. He had no real set of social skills, and I forgot to mention that even though those friendships that he had would like fizzle out, it was his mom that would actually reignite these friendships from time to time and be like, hey, come over, and hey, let's do this, because she was also friends with those friends' moms. So it was his mom that would facilitate a lot of his social life. And if she didn't do it, then it didn't exist. So around this time, his parents just felt that, dang, like Elliot is filled with so much hate. So the fact that he even says this goes to show that his parents were noticing these strange behaviors in him. And I guess they were trying to do something about it. So they decided that he should go to Morocco with Sumaya, okay, for a change. Elliot was so angry, he didn't want to go, and he tried to fight his parents on this. And then he decided the night before he was supposed to fly out, he was going to run away. So he actually did try to run away. He like ran down the street, but somehow his father like realized or knew that he was going to run away. His father chased him and forced him to go to Morocco. When he was in Morocco, he was so miserable there. He clashed with Sumaya a lot, and he ended up calling his mom and saying, please, blah, blah, blah. And his mom ended up bringing him back home. Anyway, so now when Sumaya returned from the Morocco trip, Elliot was now 18, and she was super angry at him for his behavior in Morocco, maybe because it embarrassed her, and she kicked him out of the house. She was like, you're 18, get out. She also forbade him from even entering the house to visit. That's how angry she was at him. Now, Elliot claims his father was too weak to stop Sumaya, and he was 18. He was the eldest child of the home. She had no right to do what she did. And because of this, he hated Sumaya even more. And he also started hating his father for not standing up for him. His misery became harder and harder to bear. And according to him, none of his parents understood this. He claims that his father thought everything was all good with Elliot. And he was like, how can he be so blind? He was too caught up in his own failing business and, failing career to notice my struggles. He said that his father never prepared him for how cruel the world was, and he never taught him how to attract women. He never warned him that if he didn't learn to attract women from a young age, that his life would be, a misery pit. He kept asking himself, how could his father be so blind? He is now 18, and honestly, he still gets bullied here and there. And the wild thing, according to him, he even got bullied on the street, which I'm like, does that really happen? Like, I don't ever remember ever getting bullied on the street, but he claims that kids would just throw eggs at him when he was walking down the street, and also claims that kids tried to jump him, and that's the reason why he carried a knife. But yeah, it's wild. And not to defend him, but I can understand his hatred for kids his own age if that's how he was treated by majority of the time by those same kids. Even if he didn't, make an effort to befriend people, no one no one should be treated that way. But kids who knew him state that it was Elliot and his belief that he was of such a high status and high wealth that other kids were not worth his time. And I fully believe this because maybe kids who weren't at his level, tried to be friends with him, tried to talk to him, but he doesn't even regard them. And therefore, he doesn't talk about, these kids trying to be friends with him because he doesn't believe that they're at the level that he wants to be at. Another theory of mine is maybe he was like so shy and so sort of weird that he didn't even know how to accept someone approaching him. Like someone came up to him, he was just like, hey. Like if you watch his videos, you can just see he's strange. That's all I can really say. He's strange. He only wanted to be friends with kids that he deemed were worthy. His social anxiety together with his low confidence, low self-esteem, it's just a bad mix. Now, before we move on, I want to mention that it is claimed that since Elliot was 8 years old, he had been seeing a variety of therapists and receiving psychiatric treatment for a variety of mental illnesses and disorders. And this was done by, obviously, his parents. But in his manifesto, Elliot doesn't mention anything about any therapists or anything like that, at least that I read. I mean, I read it twice, till he was 18. So I'm not sure why he didn't mention it or if he just skimmed past it. But his mother also did set him up with a life coach when he was 18. And I'm not sure, how much that helped him, but he did take on this opportunity with open arms. Then when he was around 18 as well, he also got his first job, but he quit after just one day because it turned out to be a menial custodial job where he had to clean bathrooms and offices. I mean, beneath him. Then when he gets his license, his mother gives him her old car to use because she had now begun dating this millionaire, like 500 millionaire, and he had given her a new car. So he got his mother's old car. And when his mom began dating this guy, he begged his mom to marry this guy because, he was worth $500 million. And Elliot was like, I belong in a rich family. Being in a rich family would make him popular, and popularity would win him women. His mom was like, no, I'm not marrying anyone because I never want to get married again. And soon he begins taking this car and just driving around, and he began doing that. That was his new thing. He used to often go for walks and observe people, but now he began driving and observing people, and he would especially go on these things he called his night drives. And soon into this, he claims that he learned not to go out on drives during the weekend because too many teenagers would be out and it would really upset him. Then when he was nearing 20 years old, his parents sit him down. They're like, Elliot, you need to change your life. You need to figure it out. Like, they were not happy with the path that he was on. Now, I'm guessing the reason for this is their kid is 20 and they are noticing that he's not growing out of this social awkwardness, this strange behavior and this loneliness. And they grew concerned. And I'm sure they knew he was kind of off from his teen years, maybe even when he was a child. But now they were like, okay, you're like really not growing out of it. And they really didn't know exactly how to help him, I think. But they told him, okay, maybe you need to like move and get out, have a fresh start, have a change of scenery. So they brought up the idea of him moving to Santa Barbara, thinking that this change of scenery, this change of environment would be good for him and he could possibly socialize and take these new classes and just meet new people. He would be living on his own and his mom would pay for his rent, give her her old car, and his dad would pay for his tuition. He would also be giving Elliot $500 a month for living expenses. And keep in mind, his father at this point was still not doing too financially well. So, this is like, I don't know, is that a lot of money in America? I feel like over here, paying for college, we don't pay for college in Australia really. So I know college is expensive. So I'm guessing this is a lot of money on top of paying $500 a month for his living expenses. Now, Elliot loved this idea because he had seen the movie Alpha Dog a few times. And I believe that movie depicts like kids partying and, doing things in Isla Vista. So he was like, yeah, I'm going to live that life too. So his parents move him into an apartment in Isla Vista. And soon he discovers that none of his roommates were virgins. When he finds this out, he gets so upset, so ashamed that he runs to his room and cries. During this time too, he just believed that wealth was the way to get him everything he ever wanted. So he got stuck into gambling, and he would just purchase a ton of lottery tickets and spend a lot of money on it. He even left the state and drove to Arizona to buy these special lottery tickets in the hopes of winning, because winning would equal money and money would equal women. And he never won. So at this point, the manifesto just goes into like extreme detail about how miserable his daily life was, how he just kept seeing people happy and he wasn't happy. He basically just whinged about it. He can't get women, but he sees men getting women all around him and how miserable he is and how he just doesn't, like, it's not fair and I don't get what I want. Like, that's basically how it's depicted. He felt worthless because of this. And he not only wanted sex for himself and women for himself, but he wanted to prove to everyone that he was worth something, that he was able to get it too. During his entire time in Santa Barbara, his life just went like that. He wore designer clothes to his first day of class, confident that someone would approach him because of the way he looked. They didn't. He'd get drunk and walk down Del Playa Street, which is like the main area where kids throw parties and they drink and they, have fun. And he would get drunk and walk this area in the hopes that he would summon the courage to approach someone. Occasionally he would, be brave enough to approach someone, but it never sort of went anywhere. And especially with women, it kind of just fizzled out. He'd like a girl in his class and develop this fixation over her. And when he realized that she either had a boyfriend or she just didn't reciprocate any sort of mutual connection, he would drop out of the class because he was unable to face the rejection that was imposed on him on a daily basis. Keeping in mind, Elliot never actually spoke to this girl or these girls. He just believed that his image and his wealthy look would make them approach him. They should talk to him. He was super shy and an introvert and was very sensitive. The one time he said hello to a girl that was passing by, she just ignored him, and he was so upset by this. He ran into a nearby bathroom and cried for an hour. But if you watch his videos, I'm sure he said a very meek hello. Like, did she even hear him? And, even if she didn't, she ignored him. Like, it's whatever. That's just life, and the fact that he would go and cry for an hour. I mean, that's not normal, guys. It's not. Like, if you feel that kind of way, you should really get help, because there's just something else going on and you probably just need someone to talk to or some treatment, because it's okay to feel sad and it's okay to feel embarrassed and go through these things, because you learn and gain confidence over time, especially if you're just a shy person. It takes time. But Elliot's like, it just doesn't seem right. There is definitely something else going on. Now, at this point, a year had passed and he obviously hadn't had a single girlfriend. And the whole point of going to Santa Barbara for him was to have sex and get girls. As a virgin, Elliot felt that he could not be respected and, in his eyes, not be a part of humanity. He even moved apartments because he nearly got into a physical fight with his roommate. So he moved into a more expensive apartment where he had just the one roommate, and then he moved again into another apartment where he had two roommates. And even after he moved, there were these two roommates that would still taunt him and make fun of him and tell him, oh, I'm about to go have sex with girls, like whenever they saw him in the street. And obviously this infuriated him. Then on March 12th, 2012, he goes to the Hunger Games premiere with Sumaya and his father, and he loved this. He loved every moment of being in the spotlight. He believed that this was his destiny. That's who he was meant to be. Then in the spring of 2013, he comes across a website called puahate.com. It was a forum full of men who was starved of sex, just like Elliot. Many of them had their own theories of why women would not sleep with them and what women are attracted to. And this just was not good for Elliot, not for a guy like Elliot. Many of them shared Elliot's hatred of women, and it was just a bad combination. It only solidified Elliot's belief of how wicked and degenerate women were. He even showed this website to his parents to give them an idea of why he was so miserable, but he claims that they never really looked at it. Then he began slowly taking out his anger on innocent couples just in the street. And honestly, he would do this in a super cowardly way by throwing his drinks on them. Once, when he was at a grocery store, he saw this couple that was in line making out, and this enraged him so much that he followed them to their car. And when they were about to get in, he like throws his coffee on them. And then as soon as he did that, he like runs back to his car and he drove away in excitement. He was so happy that he did this, and he claims that this was the first time that he struck back at one of his enemies. They were not his enemies. He wanted to inflict pain on all young couples, and that's exactly what he did. Then one time when he was at Domino's, he sees another young couple having fun, making out. So he follows them to their car and he splashes his iced tea all over them. Then another time he was driving his car and he was dressed very wealthily in his Hugo Boss shirt, and he pulls up to a bus stop and he sees these two girls sitting at the bus stop. He pulls over next to them and he smiles. Like this smile is supposed to drop their panties, is supposed to get into his car and have sex with them. But when they didn't react, he throws his coffee at them and he drives off. Then at some point around this time, he begins, he opened up a YouTube account and begins posting. And these videos are very, very troubling. He basically just complains about how lonely he is and how unfair the world is. These online communities, which he was a part of, is known as the manosphere. It's been commonly associated with misogyny and anti-feminism. It's just not a good mix for someone like Elliot. Before his 22nd birthday, he claims he made one last-ditch effort at enjoying his life. He bought all new clothes, he began working out, and he asks his mom to buy him a new car, something that was more fitting for Elliot. So he ended up getting a black BMW. So he decides, okay, tonight's the night. So he gets drunk and he goes to a house party. And at this house party, he doesn't get the attention that he's hoping to get. So he begins he doesn't even talk to anyone. He just begins play shooting everyone, and that just annoyed everyone. And then he ends up going to this top of this ledge. I don't really know what it was. He didn't describe it further than that, but it was apparently a ledge where people were on. And he tries to throw and push girls off this ledge. Now it's a 10-foot drop. And this made everyone at the party infuriated. So some people actually came up to him and beat him and then pushed him off that 10-foot ledge. He breaks his ankle during the fall and manages to get away, but he's all bloody and bruised. And by the time he stumbles home, he realizes that his Gucci sunglasses, and his gold necklace that his grandmother had given him had been missing. They were stolen. He called his sister and he cried, and this was the final straw for Elliot Rodgers. He describes the aftermath of this fight that I think is worth reading to you guys. He states, "The worst part of this whole ordeal was not getting beaten up, oh no. It was the fact that no one showed any concern. There was only one group who helped me to the end of Del Playa, but after that they abandoned me. Not one girl offered to help me as I stumbled home with a broken leg, beaten and bloody. If girls had been attracted to me, they would have offered to walk me to my room and take care of me. They would have even offered to sleep with me to make me feel better. But no, not one girl showed an ounce of concern for me. They didn't care. No one cared about me. I was all alone." Girls are going to sleep with him to make him feel better about his broken ankle, guys. As you can see from that statement alone, Elliot was a victim. Everyone did everything to him. He was unlucky, he was unimportant, he was unloved. Although he should have been the opposite of all those things. He was entitled to it. Now, Elliot had begun to plan his day of retribution after 1 year living in Santa Barbara, but after this incident, he began taking it much more seriously. This would be a day that everyone would pay for making Elliot's life miserable. In his 3 years of living in Santa Barbara, his day of retribution would be postponed multiple times, and one of them was due to the fact when he broke his ankle, he needed time to recover, but he also had to have surgery for it, so he needed time to recover from the surgery. But in that time, honestly, he did make some cries for help. His parents got him to see a psychiatrist who prescribed him risperidone, which is used to treat schizophrenia. And for those that don't know what schizophrenia is, it is mental illness that causes disturbed or unusual thinking, loss of interest in life, and strong or inappropriate emotions. And this medication also treats bipolar disorder or irritability associated with autistic disorder. And Elliot refused to take this drug. And a few different counselors were appointed to Elliot to help him with his social skills, but the only counselor that he really took a liking to was this blonde woman. But then as he was seeing her, he started to think, well, shit, like the only woman that wants to have anything to do with me is someone that my parents are paying for. And none of these counselors worked out for him. Elliot's plan was to kill everyone that prevented him from living his dream life, the life that he was entitled to live. He favored a quote that went as follows: "If I cannot join them, I will rise above them. And if I cannot rise above them, I will destroy them." So get ready, guys. He purchased handguns. He needed 3 in case one jammed, and he enjoyed holding these guns, the power it gave him. One day, his laptop broke and he had to go to Best Buy to order a new one. And as he was waiting for the order to process, he went across the road to a firing range to practice. He claims that this made him feel sick, that he had to plan this massacre. In his original plan, his plan was to kill Sumaya and then Jazz, which is strange because he seemed to really like Jazz throughout his whole manifesto, and then he goes and drops this in there. But the reason for this is because he didn't want Jazz to grow up and become more powerful than him. And Jazz really looked up to him, as per Elliot's own words. So it's just a really sick thought. He just feared what Jazz would become when he turned into an adult. And he planned to kill Sumaya, but he would only do so when his father was out of town because he just could not bear the thought of killing his own father. At this point in time, his manifesto starts to become very dark, very twisted, and very scary. He continued to upload his YouTube videos, which, can I say alone, are just so creepy and such a cry for help. These videos talked about his views and his feelings towards the world, how no girl wanted to be with him, and he was such a magnificent, amazing specimen of a human being that how could that be possible? There was something wrong with the world. How could no girl be interested in a good-looking gentleman like him? He is superior and worthy of admiration, and begins to show resentment for anything that contradicted this belief. Now, he relied on these YouTube videos, and he planned to release one final video on the day of his retribution. Now, the strange thing, and again, this is why I believe it was a cry for help, he states that he wished and hoped that these videos would garner some sympathy from somebody, hopefully a woman, but if someone would have reached out to him, but no one did. Although these videos would worry his mother. It seemed like she was either really worried for Elliot or she had a feeling he was about to do something. In late April of 2013, after watching one of his videos, she asked the police to go and conduct a welfare check on her son. 7 police officers attended his apartment, and Elliot freaked out because his day of retribution plans were written right there on paper. Elliot thought, oh my God, if the police come inside and they asked to take a look inside my apartment, they're going to find not only my notes on the day of retribution, they're going to find enough ammunition to take out a small town. However, the 7 police officers simply asked Elliot, a guy planning a mass murder, if he was contemplating suicide. Elliot answers no. Okay, end of police investigation. That was it. Police are like, cool, thanks, bye, see ya. And keep in mind, this was after the police had seen some of his videos, allegedly. These videos were pretty clear. And after this, Elliot takes some of his YouTube videos down. And this is where the police fucked up bad. I mean, all it would have taken was one quick search. His attitude towards women is now uncontrollable. He is miserable because he feels that they have prevented him from having sex because they would not have sex with him. It's just about sex. He has shown himself from a young age to be spoiled and entitled. And this is another quote from him. So I want to read one more quote, but it's a bit racist, so I'm just putting it out there. He states, "How could an inferior, ugly black boy be able to get a white girl and not me? I am beautiful, and I am half white myself. I am descended from British aristocracy. He is descended from slaves. I deserve it more." I tried not to believe his foul words, but they were already said, and it was hard to erase from my mind. If this is actually true, if this ugly black filth was able to have sex with a blonde white girl at the age of 13 while I've had to suffer virginity all my life, then this just proves how ridiculous the female gender is. They would give themselves to this filthy scum, but they reject me, the injustice. This guy, Elliot Zamzog, during the last few weeks before his planned day of retribution, Elliot just wanted to enjoy his life. He had now planned this day for 24th May 2013. He ends his manifesto with thoughts like, how dare those girls give their love and sex to those other men and not me? He states, I am not part of the human race. Humanity has rejected me. The females of the human species have never wanted to mate with me, so how could I possibly consider myself part of humanity? Humanity has never accepted me among them, and now I know why. I am more than human. I am superior to them all. I am Elliot Rodger. Magnificent, glorious, supreme, eminent, divine. I am the closest thing there is to a living God. Humanity is a disgusting, depraved, and evil species. It is my purpose to punish them all. I will purify the world of everything that is wrong with it. On the day of retribution, I will truly be a powerful God, punishing everyone I deem to be impure and depraved. He just believes that he is the one who will set the world right. So now we're coming up to the 23rd of May, 2013. And I don't want to go into too much detail about what happened again, just to be respectful. I feel like this is a very triggering topic, especially in today's time. So let's keep it short. So Elliot's rampage began with stabbing 3 people in his own apartment. All 3 victims were UCSB students. 20-year-old Cheng Yuan Hong, known as James, and 19-year-old George Chen. These 2 were Elliot's roommates that lived in the same apartment as him. And the 3rd victim was Wei-Han Wang, who was known as David. He was just 20 and he was just visiting his friends. At 9:17 p.m. after the murders, he emailed his 107,000-word manifesto titled My Twisted World to about a dozen people, including his parents and his therapists. He then uploaded his final YouTube video online, and his mom watched this.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution, the day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you. You will all be animals. You are animals, and I will slaughter you like animals. I hate all of you sexually active men. I hate you. I hate all of you.
Therapist had actually called his mom to tell her about what she received, and then his mom watched the video. Then his mom called Peter, his father, and then also the police. His mother, his father, and Sumaya all quickly drove down to Isla Vista to hopefully stop what Elliot was planning to do. So now I'm going to outline the next murders that took place. After the stabbing spree in his apartment, he then drove 5 blocks to the Alpha Phi sorority house. And he actually went there and he was knocking on the door, like banging on the door. And the residents heard the knocks, but they didn't open the door. They just thought it was weird. And at around this time, 9:27 p.m., the first 911 call was placed. Because no one answered the door at the sorority house, Elliot then walks further down and he encountered a group that included Veronica Weiss and Catherine Cooper. And as witnesses inside the sorority house watched, Elliot shot and killed these 2 women. And a 3rd woman was also shot, but she was wounded. 3 minutes later and 2 blocks down, and this one is, I don't want to say famous, but it's well known, this scene. It takes place at a deli on Paradil Road, and Elliot exits his vehicle at that area and he just shoots into this deli, and he fatally shot 20-year-old Christopher Martinez. And 4 police officers who were on foot patrol saw him get in his vehicle after shooting and drive off in his black BMW. And this video alone is very traumatizing. I mean, I can't imagine how those... I just got goosebumps. Oh my God. Ugh. I can't imagine how those students would recover from that. Then there was an area called The Loop, and Elliot was in his car and he shot at 2 people on the sidewalk. He then turned east onto Del Playa. He waved a gun at a woman there and then headed west on Del Playa. He began firing at a sheriff who was on foot, and the sheriff returned fire on Elliot, but Elliot just kept driving. Elliot then drives and hits a bicyclist, like runs him over, and then he shoots at pedestrians on the road and he injures 4 of them. At 9:33 p.m., he keeps driving east and he encounters 4 police officers and he fires at them and they fire back. Elliot was shot in the hip, which I'm guessing it went through the car door. He kept driving, he turns left, he sees another bicyclist, and witnesses say he then accelerates to hit this cyclist. When he did that, the cyclist flew into the air and crashed into the windshield, which caused Elliot to crash into some parked cars. Elliot had finally stopped. The police quickly pull up to his car. They get Elliot out. They drag him out. They handcuff him before they realize that he was dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. With Elliot's rampage, 6 people were killed and 14 other people injured, 7 from gunshot wounds and 7 by blunt trauma sustained when Elliot hit them with his car. If you want to learn more about the victims, I will leave a link below. I pray for the victims' families and the victims and what they went through and what they must still be dealing with, and I just don't want to open any old wounds. Elliot was a clear misogynist. I mean, a real misogynist. We throw that word around often calling other men that, but a misogynist is a man who hates women, and Elliot hated women. He was driven by this, but first and foremost, I believe that he was mentally ill. When Elliot's parents divorced in 1999, his mother, Lee, she made a request for his child support, and in that request, she noted that her son had special needs. Elliot's mother claims that he had high-functioning autism. Now, this raises the question, was Elliot autistic all along and just did not receive any treatment? If so, could going untreated for such a long period of time cause him to erupt in such a violent way? Although autism does not typically cause someone to become violent. Also, autism is not considered to be, I believe, a mental illness, and he was treated by multiple therapists, so maybe he was able to conceal some other signs of mental instability. The problem again is misogyny alone does not cause you to kill multiple people. He also had an upbringing that unfortunately spoiled him, hadn't taught him to deal with the frustrations of life, how to roll with the punches. When Elliot committed this crime, it raised a lot of discussion into misogyny and violence against women, and unfortunately, it also brought out all the sickos who claimed that Elliot was a hero. Men who were incels themselves who believed that what Elliot did was right. He is known as the supreme gentleman online, and fans even made, I can't even believe I'm saying fans, but fans even made merch with his face and those words on it. And that's the problem with the internet, because as good as it can be, it also can bring together people like this with dangerous minds that can create dangerous situations. Elliot's rampage hopefully does not encourage copycat crimes, but kind of did, because there was a massacre at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, Oregon in 2015, and it was the deadliest massacre to occur at a community college. A 26-year-old student that was named Christopher Sean Harper Mercer was the perpetrator, and he left notes that confirmed he had studied Elliot's rampage as well as other mass killings, and he wrote about his frustrations, the same as Elliot, about being lonely and being a virgin and an incel. So Elliot's parents claimed that they could not have predicted this. They could never imagine that Elliot would have done something like this. During an interview with Barbara Walters, Peter Rogers states, Elliot was far from evil. Something happened to him. He was the most beautiful, kind sweetheart of a boy, and something happened to him. He was adorable, and he would laugh so much that sometimes we were worried he would choke. I feel sorry for his parents too. I mean, nobody wants to see their kids commit such a horrific act and kill other people's children. I think the most important thing about this case and why it's important to talk about it is to understand why he did what he did to prevent it from happening in the future. Yes, Elliot suffered some hard times, but to me, it was a normal childhood. He didn't suffer anything out of the ordinary. Normal teenage experiences, and Elliot acted like people, and girls especially, were set out to make his life just miserable. They were depriving him intentionally of the things he wanted. And the most annoying thing to me about all of this is his obsession with sex. Saying you're an incel, involuntary celibate, is not other people's fault. It's especially not women's fault. Women are not obligated to have sex with anyone, the same way men are not obligated to have sex with women. Sex is supposed to be a mutual consenting act. Most of the time, these incels don't even try to be social, engage with other women. They've got their own issues. It's not like women are just like, no, you're not it, It's just weird to promote that. And again, it's not these incels' fault all the time as well. They need help. They need support if they have social awkwardness, social anxiety. These can be treated and you can be quote unquote normal, You don't have to revert to like going into this community and just becoming deeper into a depression and hate women. And it's like a horrific, weird cycle. I feel like I've had firsthand experience with this because I know someone who considers himself to be an incel. He doesn't openly talk about it a lot, but I've heard him say it before, and I feel sorry for him because he has just been raised in a way that like he's kind of almost forgotten. You know what I mean? Like he had other siblings and they got attention and he was kind of just forgotten, and he was sort of, so much pressure was put on him to be a boy, to be like a manly, masculine boy. They were forcing him into sports and things like that, but that's just not who he was. And what I think, he needs help. And people like me, I've tried to help him. People around me have tried to help him. I don't want to say too much, but we've tried to help him. And sometimes it's the people that are closest to that person need to help him, because you yourself have turned a blind eye because you're so used to that person. But you just can't turn a blind eye to these things. You never know when people can snap. If you know someone like this, someone who is struggling, I feel like we have to help them, even if you just give them a phone number. I know on the other hand, we can't force anyone to get help as well. But another thing, guys, having sex, relax. It's not a big deal. Sex is a big deal. That's not what I mean. But I mean, if you don't have sex by the time you're 50, and that's young. If you don't have sex by the time you're 23, that's not a big deal. It will happen. Relax. I feel like there's too much pressure on kids these days to do it all. You don't need to do it all. Relax. Be a kid. Enjoy that. It's really such a tough situation, and my heart goes out to all the victims. They deserve to feel safe in their college campuses, in their college town, and the attention should be focused on the victims' families, their loved ones, and remembering them. I don't even know how to end this, guys. It's just so tragic. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts on this case down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Besitos. Bye. Bye, baby.